How do you progress from a player to a coach to a leader? This week, we've got a unique insight into 4 decades of experience in professional sport with rugby legend Mike Ford. We're going to dive into his backstory, his evolution, his adjustments, his change as a coach. What were the light bulb moments along the journey, and what can we learn from that as coaches? It's episode 19 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast.
Well, I signed for Wigan as a rugby league player in 1982 when I was 16, and 2025 I'm still involved in professional sport with rugby league and rugby union back to rugby league. So I played for 20 years as a rugby league player. The last 3 years was as a player coach for rugby league, and then I moved over to the other code, coaching rugby union. I was supposed to just go there to make myself a better rugby league coach and come back after 12-18 months, having gained that experience. But I soon realised that probably a career path for a coach was better in rugby union because there was more opportunities. So I actually stayed there I stayed there for 20 years, 22 years coaching rugby union. And recently, 23, my last job in rugby union was with Leicester Tigers and Steve Borthwick. And to be honest, I didn't like the way coaching was going. I wasn't very up to speed with coaching these youngsters these days. And I really fell out with coaching a little bit. So we agreed to part ways, and I came back to where I live in Oldham, in a place called Diggle. Please Google it. There's only one Diggle. And I just wanted to, I had a couple of months out. Well, I decided what to do. Set up my own web page. I wanted to be a consultant and give back to coaches or players or organisations what I've learned over the years. And I reached out. One of the first clubs I reached out to was my hometown club in rugby league, Oldham. I didn't get a response from them, but I met up with a couple of blokes, and after a few conversations, we decided to see if we could acquire the club. Now, at the time, Oldham Rugby was the lowest of the professional clubs. There's 35. We couldn't get any lower, so there was only one way up. The owner had been there 20 years, was a bit tired and fatigued, and we wanted to give it a new life and inject it. So it fit perfectly for a couple of reasons. One, I was back home and I didn't really have to travel, and B, I was giving back what I wanted to do after finishing at Leicester. And then the third thing was, it was back to my first love, rugby league. So we took over in March 23, got promoted in 24, and just finished the season in the Championship, getting to the playoffs. So it's going well. It's going well. But there's to get where we want to get to. There's a lot of work to do. We have put in for a Super League bid, for you guys who don't know, and we'll find out this time next week, the 17th of October. We'll find out whether we've gained a spot in Super League. I think it's a little bit too early for us, to be honest. And whatever happens, we'll look to go out and try and get better next year if it's in the Championship. So that's where we are. And that's what I've done in my career thus far.
Add a bit of texture for people that don't follow rugby, and also potentially link into where we first met Mike. So Mike's coach, to name but a few, Bath Rugby, England Rugby, also the Lions as well. On that as well, British Lions, Mike, also. So at the highest level in rugby union, international and the Premiership, he's been there, as well as Saracens, etc. So interestingly, for people that don't know, when we first met was it 99, Mike, or 2000, something like that? Yeah. And it was with Oldham Rugby League, and we got in touch through the late great Peter Deacon, who's passed away now, unfortunately. And it was just getting in the pre-season. So Mike was a player coach at that time, and we just started on that. How can we get players to own themselves, to not get caught up in results, to really connect as a team. And that's where our journey started together, me and Mike. So it was like a long process. We lost touch and we got in touch again when he was working with England and Bath, etc. So that's kind of where the correlation is. And now Mike's back at Oldham. So Alan, for you, if I can trigger Mike, is Mike had one of those light bulb moments when he was with England in that point about we talk about, Alan, is, we can tell them what to do, we can coach them, we can do all the preparation, we can, look at all these elements. And then now and again, you get those light bulbs to think, hang on a minute, I'm doing all the thinking for them, this isn't working. And I remember, Mike, you had one of those light bulb moments with England.
Yeah, I think
you want to share that?
It was 2010, maybe 2009. I was coaching England in a Six Nations game, and we were playing Ireland at the weekend. We started really well in the championship. I think it was the third game. Having played the two hardest games, the French game and the Irish game, we had a couple of good wins there. So we were on for a triple crown, and we're also on for a Grand Slam. And I was a defence coach, and there was a training session where I was trying to implement an insurance policy. So if our first plan A didn't work, we had a plan B that covered us up, and it involved a blindside winger, Hugo Monye, pundit on TV at the moment, where if from a line out they broke us in the 10 channel, they made a break. We had the blindside winger stood in position, stood the right distance away, in the square on north to south, ready to make that tackle. And as I was coaching, I review training, I can see myself grabbing hold of Hugo and telling him to stand here, that sort of stuff. And anyway, it came to the game, last one of the 8 minutes to go, we're winning the game, a line out to Ireland, they come off the top and they attack the channel, and they make a break, and Hugo is in the wrong position. He's not only not square, so he's facing east-west instead of north-south, he's not even in the right position to make the tackle, and he has to run across the pitch, and he gets sidestepped easily, and they score under the sticks. And we're having a debrief afterwards, and we lose the game. We had a debrief afterwards, and I've said to the coaches, I'm really disappointed about that try, because it's what we practice. I told Hugo where to stand, and Martin Johnson, the head coach, said, yeah. I remember you telling him. I remember seeing him. I said, look, it's here on my video. And I've still got this video on my desktop now of me pushing him over. Right, he's having it tomorrow in the review, kind of stuff. And I thought what I'd do is I'd ask him straight out. I put the clip up straight away, and I asked him, I said, Hugo, what did we do on Tuesday in training? Where did I tell you to stand? And he just looked at me blank. He just looked at me blank. So I'm fuming. I'm thinking he knows where to stand, and he's just trying to get out of it. So I asked Mark Cueto, the other winger, because I did the same with him. So I said, Mark, tell Hugo where he should stand, and he says, I don't know. And the light bulb moment for me was, maybe it's me as a coach who's got this wrong. Sorry. And what I realised, and when I reflected on it, is I've not tested their understanding of the position I wanted them to be in. Do you know what I mean? So the way I tested it was on a match day in a Grand Slam game with 8 minutes to go. I thought I'll test it then, which is obviously too late to test it. So it was a light bulb moment where, although I've implemented something in training and I've told them and I've shown them, until they do it without prompting, without me being there like it is on a match day, then I can't see that they've understood it. So I very much went then from a tell coach to an ask question coach to a test coach in training. So I think I learned off you, Mark, when you're doing a defence session, implement something, take them away, do something else, do an attack drill or something like that, and then just go bang, let's defend this, and then just let them go on, let's see what they do, kind of stuff, you know. And then if they do it wrong, then you can ask, and then if they don't get the question right, then you can ask someone else. And if they don't get it right, you've got a problem the way you're coaching. Do you know what I mean? So it's unless you ask the questions and understand, I understand where he should be. I know, but I'm not playing, kind of stuff. So it was fantastic, and it was 2010, Mark. I've been coaching. Well, I've been coaching 10 years. I was coaching in England, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? And I was coaching all wrong.
Mark, can I jump in there real quick? Mike, first of all, as an Irishman, I love that story. Thanks for sharing. Great memories for me as an Irishman.
Tommy Ball scored.
Oh, now we're talking about real rugby. Hey, there's so many different directions we can go there, like so many different directions. But Mark, to tee this up to go well, or to go in a nice format that listeners can really take away stuff here, I'm gonna pump the brakes on where I think your mind is going to be going here and getting into the weeds of stuff. Mike, would you mind, before I ask the question, actually, my colleague and I, Simon, who's not on the call here today, you know, we often say to coaches, or we challenge coaches with the question around, have you got 10 years coaching experience, or have you got 1 year coaching experience repeated 10 times? And I think that's something you signaled there when you said, I've been coaching 10 years. And it hasn't been till this point in time I've gone, well, hang on a second, how do I know they're digesting and understanding what I'm telling them to do, let alone apply it under pressure in the biggest moment of their careers or season? But just going back to something you said a bit earlier, you didn't like the way coaching was going. Can you speak a bit on that? You just said that there in your intro earlier. You walked away for a period of time because you didn't like the way coaching was going. What does that mean?
I think it was strength and conditioning that took over the sport, and medical, and there was had control of how many minutes you trained on the field, how fast you went on the field. You know, in one case, this player can only run 450 meters in this training session, and then halfway through the training session, they're pulling him out without you knowing. I didn't like that. Because I always think your support staff are there to as a head coach is to give you the information, and then you can decipher how best way to go about that without necessarily not listening to them. You always listened. So there were that bit I wasn't very. So in my head, training was then gone to chaos. It was gone to chaos. So I thought. The way I viewed it is that the players weren't learning. The players weren't learning moments in training because, for example, they wanted it to be a fast session and we'd have one ball in play, the team would make an error, and then the coach would kick another ball in because the strength and conditioning team said it needs to be fast, we need to run this many meters. But the team that made the error with the first ball weren't learning the consequences of that and weren't learning how to deal with the consequences. The second ball went in and then they went off to and it wasn't the game anyway because you don't have two balls in place. I get the drill. So there was what I call chaos, and my understanding of coaching at that time, it's 2000 COVID 2022-23 of how to coach players and the team of game understanding. Of course, you coach them not to make a mistake, don't you? But if you do a mistake, what does the team need to do in that context, in that situation? And the second thing was the way they presented. The analysis that they did was more clips of the players. They were trying to put a theme on everything. Now, I like themes for potentially a block of games, or maybe even just a week. You have a theme. The analogy of a theme would be, right, we're going to use boxing terms this week, kind of stuff. But the analysis were more jovial, more clips of somebody being out in a nightclub and trying to make a connection with that nightclub, and the lad chatting up a girl, and and then trying to make an analogy with within the game plan. And for me, it was we were missing all the detail. The lads were laughing and controlling, because I did a lot of work on messaging and getting the players to understand the messages, and then getting the players to execute the messages, both pre-game, pre-training, half time, during the game. Can they get a message? Can they absorb the message? And I just at the time I was thinking, am I getting a bit of a dinosaur here? If this is the way it's going, kind of stuff. I've since spoken to Howard George, who plays for England, playing for Sale Sharks. He was in them sort of meetings, and I was getting Ben Youngs was in it. I was very close to them too, and I was asking them, did they get anything out of the meetings and out of the training sessions? And the answer was no. So that's where I'm coming from it. I didn't like the way things were going. The environment as well. I won't go too much into that, but the environment as well was not one that I liked.
And putting a bit of layer on that, Alan, for you, when Mike was head coach at Bath, one of the things that he instigated was groups of players that would be chosen, so they'd be different each time, and they would go away and clip, or ask to be clipped, the review of the match. Then they would present, and the coaches would sit in the back, and they'd do it. The coaches would do it as well, but they wouldn't be stood up the front. It would be the players standing up and go, this is what we saw. This is our interpretation in this situation. So they were looking at choices, execution, what would they adapt, what they saw. And then the coaches would say, yeah, because they'd have their notes, cover that. And then if there's missed something, then the coach would go, could you put a bit more detail on that? Or what did you mean by that? And then, okay, so what does that mean for us moving forward? So it was quite a shift from what Mike shared there to when he was head coach, and he developed the athletes to go, hey, I want to know what you understand. So you're going to do that process. We'll still do it as coaches, but you're going to go first. As that an example, Alan?
So Mike, if you go back to the light bulb moment, I mean, Mark's given us one example there. You know what? And Mark went on a bit of a journey with you, I believe. And, I think that was around the time Mark started working with myself. It wasn't long after he'd spent time with Bath Rugby, because, you had some of those conversations, and I was making a transition from a very much do coach to actually pump the brakes, step back, and actually let's look at the impact. Let's look at the evidence of impact I'm having with my coaching approach, and let's spot areas where actually it's not having an impact, and let's be honest about that, and turn the camera on myself a lot actually as to the value I'm having on as a coach of a national team with these level of players. And, Mark helped me with a bunch of different interventions that allowed me to take these players to another level and take myself to another level first, which was very uncomfortable at the beginning, Mike, to be honest with you. Would you mind sharing your early days of Mark on the touchline with you, or, in whatever capacity? And I'll pause there and let you take it on.
Yeah, well, first of all, met him in 2000 when he took our team onto a camp down in Plymouth, Mark, and the boys, I don't know if Mark knows this, the boys in that squad still meet up to this day, and they still talk about the camp that Mark put on. And then, he had a big impact on me, helped me with England. I've been uncomfortable with that GoPro on. Yeah.
I can relate, Mike. I can relate.
And it's quite embarrassing when you watch yourself coach, isn't it? But so fulfilling, and it was a great analysis of like when it's there in front of you. Because if you would have just told me what I were doing, I never did that kind of stuff. And when he filmed you, and we talked things through, and the biggest thing I suspect, he followed me around. He was like my shadow. So every time we had a group meeting, he was my shadow, and he just, as we broke up, he'll say, remember what we said we'd do, and he'll give me little things, snippets to do. Pre-training session, which was like uncomfortable, because I'm thinking about him instead of the team. You know what I mean? And I wanted to, so. But it was his work, I suppose, he did in the classroom with me. And the where we got to was, and again, I've not played rugby league or rugby. Yeah, I've not played rugby league since 2001. You know what I mean? So, although I'm a coach and I'm a very experienced coach, the game gets faster, the game gets more brutal, the tactics change a little bit. It's the players on the field who've got to make the decisions, and they have in that decision they have a feel potentially that you don't as a coach on the sideline. They have a feel of what's happening, whether this one more scrum's going to break them or not. They have that feel, and I quickly wanted to make sure that they took on ownership of the game, of the training sessions, of the game plan, of the review. They took ownership of it. I saw myself then as a facilitator. And then it didn't. I was lucky. I was looking at, in a sense, that the previous coach at Bath Rugby, for example, was a South African, and he was a TEL coach, very good coach. Believed in exactly the philosophy of his way of coaching. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right, or his game plan wrong or right. I'm not saying that. But when I took over, the club hadn't done very well. We all agreed that things had to change. And we went from a TEL organisation to an ASK organisation. I always remember the early days, Alan, of a player called Tom Biggs, and I was asking him all these questions. He goes, God's sake, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. Because what he wanted as a player, if I said, I want 10 carries off you, I want you to kick chase as hard as you can, or whatever I said, and he did that, then I could never drop him. That's what he wanted. I could never drop him. But the way I was coaching, it was always, I wanted the players to make decisions. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't that black and white of what you had to do in terms of carries and tackles and things like that. But we coached principles. We coached principles, and in this principle, right, you've got to make a decision, right? And a good example of that would be how quick the ruck is in rugby. How quick is the ruck? Is it quick ball? Are you on the touchline? Are you in the middle of the field? Are you in your own half? Are you in their half? Are you winning? Are you losing? Is the referee doing this? Is the referee doing that? And all. So, as opposed to the ruck's in the middle of the field, quick ball, you should have done this. Hopefully I've coached them well enough to ask the question, right, what could we have done better here? Yes, our principle is this. So let's do that. And Mark was quite instrumental of me. I didn't, it was organic. I didn't know it'd get to this, but it got to the stage where we reviewed the game plan at half time. It got to a stage where, Mark, if you remember, I got the leaders before we went in the changing rooms. I wanted to know what they thought first about the game plan. I had my own view, of course, but if the players were on the same wavelength of me, I didn't have to say anything at half time. I didn't have to say anything because the players understand what was going wrong. Now, times to get it wrong, and you have to facilitate that. But that's where we got to. So, the review on Monday with their review, because we had done the plan all through the week. The players understood the plan, so that means that's what we're going to review on the Monday, and it was. I think I was so proud of the moment. It takes a while. This I was at Bath 4 years, so I'm not saying we did this in the first year at all. Do you know what I mean? But the end of the second year, things started to fall into place a little bit about these players actually taking the meetings. Yeah, we'd have leadership meetings. We'd have with a few players, making sure we're all on the same page and making sure that we're all agreed with the plan. and stuff, but they grabbed it. They got hold of it. And it was, go back to what Mark did when I had the GoPro on. I was in group huddles and I was just going blah, 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 blah. I'm the coach of the team. I need to tell them. I need to show them how much I know and what they're doing wrong. And it was quite embarrassing, really. And I had a couple of assistant coaches, if you remember, Mark, who took a bit longer than me to realise what they were doing. Do you know what I mean?
We'll delve into that, Mike, because I think this is important, what you actually did then. And Alan, you, no doubt this will connect with your principles as well, is Mike brought me in. He said, right. And he said to the assistant coaches, look, I'm bringing Mark in. He's going to mentor me anyway. It's up to you whether he wants to mentor you or not. But just give him a chance and then you can let me know. So, I asked them to put the video on, the camera on. They sat down on a one-to-one and I just asked them, what are you seeing here? And then after that journey, it was about a week, 2 weeks, I think. Then they went to Mark and says, no, yeah, it was uncomfortable. It makes sense. So, yeah, let's go on the journey. But because they're very different personalities, what they grasped on and what they found easy and what they found hard was very different to them. So it was almost you needed a season of tripping up and learning and I'm falling back on what I said I was going to do, a bit of regression, I'm back on it. And then the second season, it starts to get more consistent. But back to an example, Mike, that still rings out with me. I don't know, putting some texture onto what you shared there is what Mike did. He developed the coaches and the athletes to make sure that whoever's the person doing the action, they quantify it first. So like he said, they're coming off a half timer at the end of the match. Straight away, you'll see they're used to. They'll go to Mike and they'll go, right, this is what we're seeing. This is what we think. So by the time they get to the change room, Mike did it with the assistant coach as well. It was clear who would be speaking. There wouldn't be people chucking in extra information. But there was a great example of live quantifying. This, you may not remember this, Mike, but for some reason I remember the story, is there was a scrum. I think Stuart Hooper made a decision. And you were in the stands and go, right, let's kick because we've won the game now, we'll kick. And Stuart went, no, we'll take the scrum, which is an option a player can do. And they went into the scrum and the referee called it to the opposition. So we didn't get the extra score, which I think was a bonus point. I think it was something like that, or a draw. But there was risk reward for the kick. And the coaches were going, why didn't they kick? They should have kicked. Instead of getting angry, which I think Mike may have done 5 years before, and go, look, Mike went, hang on a minute. And then he spoke to Stuart and said, Stuart, could you explain to me why you chose the scrum? Yeah. And Stuart went, we believe we got them. We could feel it in the scrum. Something the coach would never have seen from the sideline. We go, we 100% got them. We don't believe the ref made the right call there, but we believed we had them in a scrum, and that's why I went for the scrum. Yeah. And so Mike's going, that's something I wouldn't know from the sideline, but it's something I trust you, and secondly, that's a judgment. You're now making me understand why you made that decision. Do you remember that story, Mike, in that texture?
Yeah, 100%. And I used to, the assistant coaches would get a penalty, they'll run on with the tee, and I'll just stop. I need to know what decision they're making here. I know what we'd make, but need to know. And it grew and grew. So the leaders got better and better at making a decision. And you talk it through, always talk it through, and then give them another perspective on it. This is why, and we came with some principles. For example, don't even think about kicking the goal unless it's an 80% success. It's in a position where the success rate for kicking this goal is 80%. If it's less than 70% and it's near the touchline or whatever it is, then unless it's the last kick of the game, obviously they make the right decision. Right, go for touch. So we had principles behind it in context to their feel of the game and their understanding of the scoreboard and etc. and how long there's left on the time. But it was very, very difficult for the other coaches to let them make the decision. But once we did, we grew as a team, because it's they cross the whitewash and it's them, isn't it? It's them. But just to give you a context, Alan, when I first signed for Wigan, and it wasn't until 82, and it wasn't until I met a guy called Darryl van der Velde, an Australian coach who had a big impact on on the way I coach today. God bless his soul. He was an Australian. I've never been. I thought I was being coached up to that point, but when you reflect on it, you were never ever being coached. And the way I say it is, the coaches back in the day used to tell you what to do or what you should have done on the Tuesday after you played on a Sunday. Right, well, that's no good for me as a player. The game's gone. Don't tell me on a Tuesday what I should have done on a Monday. You know, and if we won on a Sunday, oh, you're brilliant, Mike, you did everything we said. And if we lost, oh, Mike, you didn't do anything we said. Do you know what I mean? Kind of stuff. So I vowed to myself, and because I always wanted to be a coach, I vowed to myself, I'm never going to review anything that I've not coached a player, because I hated it. You know, I hated the coach telling me that I should have kicked it here, or I should have passed it there, or I should. And yet training wasn't geared up for me to make them decisions, and we could discuss it in training. Back in the 80s, coaching was just motivation a little bit. But because I was the scrum half and the main player, all the decisions came down to me, and I even hated them saying well played. Do you know what I mean? Because you're only saying well played because we've won. And it wasn't until, I got come under the influence of Daryl van der Velde that, I grasped the coaching side of it and even playing side of it better. So I've always, even now, I'll share this with you. Sale played at the weekend against Bath away, and the review is the coach is saying you should have done this, this, and this, but it rained, Mark, on the night. The wind was coming sideways on the night, and they trained all week in the dry. Do you know what I mean? And they hadn't trained all summer pre-season in good weather. They hadn't trained for being in wet weather. So the coaches are now saying, oh, well, this is what you should have done. And I'm going, hold on, George, hold on. If they're so clever, why didn't you practice wet weather football? Even for 20 minutes during the week, why didn't you practice the team? Do you know what I mean? If you're so clever. But what they do is coaches, still very much today, they've got a game plan, right? They watch the game, and then they don't review the game plan that they put in place for the team. They don't review that they thought was good before the game. They go, oh, we've lost. You should have done this other game plan that they haven't put in place, And as a coach, I hate that.
I can strongly relate to that, and I often find myself saying to coaches who do critique players, I often come back to them actually, well, what you're seeing is what you've coached. And you've given a great example there, the wet weather. If you didn't practice for that, then you didn't coach it. So what you're seeing on that night is not the player's fault. It's what you've coached. It's what you've limited them to do. And I love the review process. Mark helped me with that a lot down through the years, going back 10, 15 years now, where I'd consider myself a strong reflective practitioner. I practice reflection a lot. But when I encountered Mark, I realized there's a better way to do it. I was waiting till the sessions were over to reflect on the session and do a review post-session. But with Mark's support, I found myself going, right, we get to a 70% mark in this practice. Let's pump the brakes. Let's do a recall check, because that's your real reflection, a real review of what's been learned or what's been embedded. Are we still in the learning phase? Are we still in the performance phase? Mark, can I ask Mike another question? I'm going to actually rewind a little bit here, if you don't mind. Mike, there was a shift in your coaching, all right, that you've displayed here really well and articulated it fantastic and given us some wonderful examples about a shift and a journey you've gone on in your coaching. I'm curious, do you have a perspective on what did the players notice? Did the players notice anything? Was there challenges as you made a shift? Because a lot of our listeners will be thinking, actually, I don't know about that way of coaching and I can see value in it and I'd like to make a shift myself. What kind of barriers did you come up against, be it the players, be it owners, management, be it doubt yourself, looking at yourself on the camera? Was there anything that rattled you a little bit or maybe could have gotten your way of going, to hell with that, I'm going to go back to the way I was coaching?
I think what helped, Alan, was when I, let's take the Bath example, because that's when I became, well, I've been head coach before, but that's when I thought I was ready to be head coach, and my philosophy on coaching had changed, and I had a group of players, as I mentioned earlier, who it was in an environment that was different to what I wanted to coach for. So I had some challenges. I mentioned a player there, just tell me what to do. And I spoke to the owner about the way I wanted to coach. And people say, and you've heard this phrase many a time, of play what you see, which then you put the onus back on the player, and but then if something goes wrong, it's the player's fault, and it alludes to going away from your principles, and it alludes to going away from your game plan a little bit. But my play, what you see, was always principle based. It was always principle based, and that was a challenge. That was a challenge because players would say to me, "Well, you told me to play what you see," but we talk it through. But players used it as an excuse for what they did. Do you know what I mean? So that was a challenge early doors to get them, and I soon got away from play what you say because they were using it as a tool to justify their decision, their usually wrong decision to do it. So the owner, there was no really blocks with the owner. Once you have to educate them, don't you? You have to educate them in the way you play and the way you're training, you know, and the way you conduct meetings and stuff like that. So I used to meet him every Monday, and we used to talk things through and the philosophy and stuff. The main challenge, I think, Alan, for me was getting players to stand up and talk in front of the peers. With England, for example, you play week on week. So you play a block of 4 games, and Johnny Wilkinson, right? You name the team. You wouldn't name the team till Thursday before the game, right? But nobody would stand up on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Like Johnny wouldn't stand up and say, "This is my team." They'd always be coy about it because they get stick of, "Oh, so you're selected. You think you're selected now, Johnny? Do you?" Johnny's probably a bad example, but you know, Mark Cueto or Hugo Monye wouldn't grab hold of the team till Thursday because they've not been selected. That's a good example of players not presenting in front of the team. But at Bath Rugby, it was a case of the lack of knowledge, that the nervousness in doing it, I might fail here kind of stuff, and you know, so we had to do a lot of what the captain Stuart, he mentioned Stuart Hooper, the captain, mentioned George and Francois Law. Them guys were good doing it all the time. Do you know what I mean? But it was the challenge of getting the other players, and the Matt Banahans of the world and the Ross Batties of the world, the guys who are, you know, non-internationals of the world, to stand up in front of their peers and say, "This is what we're doing this weekend, and this is why we're doing it." That was, but I think, again, like I mentioned, this is not an overnight thing. Do you know what I mean? You have to, I suppose, you have to fail a couple of times before, but then not lose the will to get better and stuff. And the good thing about the Bath days were I had 3 or 4 fantastic player leaders who got this thing rolling. Do you know what I mean? We facilitated then the lesser lads, because that's what we wanted. I knew George knew, I knew Stuart Hooper knew, you know, and they could. But do the other guys know how to present? Do they fully understand the game plan and what we're trying to achieve? And yeah, I was quite proud, you know, through that journey, that the team and the whole organisation, got to that stage where we all felt comfortable the way we were operating.
I think the challenge is, and where Mike, I wouldn't say it was luck, because I don't see it as luck, but the team started to get results. And that is the best way to get buy-in from players, right? They're actually going, hang on, one, we were seen at that time, Bath was seen as playing the most exciting rugby, one. That's great for spectators, but they were starting to win games that were losing before. So all of a sudden now the players go, "Oh, this is working." The challenge you've got is, if you're losing more than you did before the change, then it's because of this. So there is an element of that when you're introducing this, is setting expectations and how we're going to measure success. Mike did a good job with the team of going, right, the scoreline doesn't give us an indication of performance, but let's look at our performance, the choices we make, our execution, because that's the texture. And I remember Haps, when he was saying that we need to improve the scrum, and he was sharing with the guys that might take 6-8 weeks to get us there, but this is what I believe we need to do in order to get there. And he got the athletes bought into it, and they committed to it. And sure enough, they ended up with a dominant scrum. But they had to get to the players, go, look, you gotta commit for weeks and weeks and weeks for us. It's not a short fix. So he's getting the athletes to buy into the why, and then they were committing to it. But they saw the return, so they were, oh, Haps was right, because now we've got a dominant scrum. So I think there's always a layer of that, isn't there?
And I think I'd like to share this with you, which I felt, again, I talked earlier about the coach telling me what to do the day after. From a team perspective, Alan, you talk about performance and learning sessions. So the Saturday before the game, we'd have a performance session. So we'd actually go a full live game against each other. We'd bring a referee in from the Rugby Football Union. We'd have walkie-talkies on. So we'd do a full game preview, if you like. So we'd warm up and we'd kick off, and we'd try and execute our game plan. Now, the first half, for example, would only be about 12 and a half minutes in that plan, but we'd play the game out. So if we scored a try in that 12 and a half minutes, the kicker would kick for goal, and the referee, it wouldn't be full on every week. It wouldn't be full on, but it'd be as close to a game as possible. And what I'd do in there, after a while, I'd throw little gremlins in so that our game plan couldn't operate. Right? Mm-hmm. For example, let's go off the top, let's go wide, and I'd flood the outside channel with men where I'll give the opposition the tactic, and they'd go and take your ball off you when you got in the outside channel. So your next line out, you go and do the same, and the same happens. So you don't do it the third time, for God's sake. The players have to make a decision. But so not only would they learn, we're going in with this game plan, but we can now shift it. And what do they shift it to? You give them the tools to say, right, this is not working, but we're going to this. But also, more importantly, I think it was the coaches. It was for the coaches that they couldn't. It was a training session, but they couldn't interfere. All they had to do was observe, because the coaches are there on the match day to help the players, not commentate on the players, not critique the players. He's good, he's bad, all these things. What can I do today to help the players play the best they can? So we then come off after 12 and a half minutes. Alan, we'll go back in the changing rooms. We simulate half time. I'll speak to the leaders. We simulate half time. I'd ask the coaches what they think. We'd decide who the message is in. 6 minutes in the changing rooms. We'd back out. All right. And then we put the subs on. So the subs are now learning to come on. They're learning to come on, and they understand where the state of the game is. Are we winning? Are we losing? How long is left? What is my role here? And all that would last 25 minutes. All it would last 25 minutes. The last thing I did was give it a captain's call. Anything the captain think that game didn't materialise in that game, but they want to practice it anyway. It might be a drop goal or routine or something. It might be one scrum play. And sometimes he said, no, I don't want to do anything. We're good to go. And I wanted to see what the players did when it went wrong. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And if it were going right, are we carrying on doing things? Are we staying disciplined to carry on doing the same thing? So, and we could talk about things and scenarios that unfolded on a Thursday. We could talk it through, and it's never exact to what happens on a Saturday. But Mark, it was the process of the thinking, the way we thought as a group. Like, we're thinking about solutions all the time. You know what I mean?
And if we mapped what you said there, Mike, so there's so many golden nuggets in there, is two things. Every coach understood, when you're going near the end of the week, you can't be stepping in, because come Friday, if it's a Saturday game, and now it's now to test it. How good has my coaching been this week? So consciously the coach is thinking, I can't keep chucking stuff in now because they won't remember it. So there's this consciousness of this period now can't be new stuff. I can't be interfering, and let's see what's happened. But also from the player's point of view, there was an understanding of, I've got to understand this because we're going to get tested. So there was a shift. I definitely saw a shift of players that would normally go, I don't understand, but I'm not going to say anything, and wandering off and go, well, coach will tell me anyway. 2, coach, can I seek a bit of clarity on that? Can we just have a one-to-one here? And even the one-to-ones on a video, it was more the athlete talking than the coach just going, look at this, look at this. So all these subtle elements became consistent in every athlete understanding, I've got to know this, I've got to know my role, I've got to be ready. And I think one of the non-negotiables with Bath one of the seasons was get there first, which was a principle of, I'm going to get up, I'm going to move into my next position before anyone else, before the opposition. So what is my role? And that level of urgency, but clarity of role, but understanding I've got to own it, that's where that was cultivated. So Mike, you shared a little bit there, but from the texture from that, I think was so important.
Yeah. And the more important thing, it's about the players, and the players absolutely loved it. They loved that. We'd train before that 25-minute session. We probably would have done units and things like that, you know, putting detail in place and stuff, which again they led. But the game understanding was from not just the players but the coaches as well.
Let me add, Mike, while I remember, chucking loads in here, Alan. Go, Mike, you're chucking in too much. But one of the things Mike also did is we recorded how long sit-down meetings were.
Yeah. And
they were too long. So Mike shared it with everybody, but we made sure that we had a maximum time any meeting could be, and what success is, what the message is, who's leading on it, who's talking it. So it was literally a 75% or more reduction in sat down in meetings, but there was real purpose. So everyone had to say, look, success for this meeting is this, and there was purpose in it. Who's leading it? Players knew they were leading it. The clarity is there. I remember a light bulb Mike moment. I think it was Toby, when Toby Booth had those, each coach and every athlete has their light bulb moment, right, where they go, and one of Toby's was, before he would, because he did, preparation was brilliant, and he wanted to share video clips, and he'd ask a player, do you understand? And they said yes. And then they go on the pitch and they're going, doesn't look like you understand. So a shift with Toby, and I can remember these moments with every coach that, you know, over the years is, Toby went and he asked the same player, right, do you understand this? And the player said yes. And instead of letting it go or filling in with words, he'd go, okay, great, let me throw a scenario up. Talk me through it. Yeah. And all of a sudden this player's going, oh.
Yeah.
And immediately Toby's going, right, my job is for them, I need to know they understand. And those little shifts made such a difference in the interaction of those meetings. So that was another layer that we put in.
Yeah.
It just sounds like it, Mike, you did, like, Mark, we talk about the gray areas. Mike, it sounded like you didn't have any gray areas with all these approaches. And the other thing I wrote down here, that like people talk about, you know, they want their players to be adaptable, and they want them to adapt to, you know, things that happen on the spot, live in action. Well, you've got to coach your practice design, your training design, and how you set that up obviously is going to facilitate that or not. And like just listening to you there talking about how you simulate halftime, the 12 and a half minutes, it's a rehearsal. You're throwing in like scenarios. You're throwing in some gremlins. You're effectively coaching the players how to be adaptable under pressure in action, and solving the problem independently, but also interdependently, which is kind of related, very strongly related to Mark's rule of 3, which you're probably very aware of.
And Alan, just to add texture to that, where you asked Mike about what didn't he like about coaching, there was still, the communication with the SNC and the physios was still very tight, but it was a head coach that was making the informed choices. So you can see now, you would never have an SNC coach, right? No, you can't do 12 minutes now. You can only do 8 and has to come off, because you're going, look, we're preparing for a match. Practice has to prepare people for matches. So tell me if there's red lines, fine. But this grey area now, I'm making that choice. And there were still players that were rested, etc. But the head coach still was making the choice on, no, we need to push a little bit more here. This is appropriate to our preparation. And when that's taken off, you can see, are we preparing? It's a bit like going into battle if you're a soldier and going, we're never going to do any hard training with live rounds. The first time we do it is when we go to war, and I wonder why you're shooting someone in the back. It's like you need that. And I think that's where Mike was sharing that discomfort, how it was going in that situation. There was still a strong relationship with SNC and physio, but it was head coach making the informed decisions.
Yeah.
And Mike, not to be conscious of your time and very appreciative of you offering your time. Should we start to round up here, Mark? And I'm wondering what are we leaving unsaid that would be just worth sharing with the listeners? So, Mark, you might have an insight there.
Yeah, I think if we linked into Mike's journey, I think where Mike was good, and if we're relating that to anyone listening, is he embraced the being comfy, being uncomfortable. Going, look, if I need to get here, I've got to be the one leading the way. I can't be telling others to change if I'm not going to change, but I'm going to challenge you. So from me, if Mike was challenging me, I'm going to challenge you, Mark, to why. So, I'm not going to do it just because he's telling me. I need to understand why. But what's importantly, he did that with the players and the coaches. He made sure they understood the why we were doing it. But once we agreed it, we were committing to it. But it was never a just do it for the sake of it blindly. And I think that was an important factor, going back to Mike saying, look, you can work to the coaches. You can work with Mark or not. Just give them a chance for a few weeks. Then you decide. I'm not telling you to. But I think there's value in it. And I think that was the whole journey of that clarity of the why, but getting people to go, if you don't understand, challenge me. If you don't agree, challenge me, but you've got to quantify it. And I think that as an environment, I think is so powerful.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to say, I pretty much, if someone said what type of coach you are, I'll say, one of the phrases I use is a common sense coach, so I have to make sure I understand the reason why, and I asked you a lot of questions at the beginning, Mark, because I didn't understand. Do you know what I mean? I didn't, but I was curious, very, very curious. And you realised I wasn't the be all and end all as a coach. I'm still not. I'm still unbelievably curious, and I knew things as a player and as a coach. Things take time. It's like learning a language. You don't get it overnight, do you? You have to. There's going to be a sticky patch where you go, actually, I'm not too sure here. Do you carry on with this, or do you pull the plug? And luckily for me, I carried on with it. And yeah, everything flowed from there. So yeah, just still using the principles today that we learned back in 2000, Mark.
Yes.
You're making Mark sound very old, Mike. He doesn't like that.
Well, he is very old, Alan.
But Mike, thank you for your time. This has been absolute gold dust. And as a coach myself and somebody who's a coach developer as well, I'm still on the sidelines. I'll never leave it, even though a lot of my time is spent with coaches. I've taken 4 pages of notes here just listening to you. And it's all stuff that Mark has worked with me on a daily basis, but you've shared some real gold dust here today. And I know many coaches who will reap the benefits of this. So thank you for your time. It was absolutely brilliant of you to jump on.
Good to meet you as well.
Yeah, you too, man. You too.
Hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Quick question for you, Mike. Anyone who wants to follow the journey at Oldham that you're on now, and also wants to give any support on that, where's the best place to follow the Oldham rugby journey? What you're doing there?
We're very, very much. We've got our own website, of course, but we're very popular on social media with our media team. Our coaching at Oldham Rugby is we're transitioning from very much part-time now, 2 days a week. Remember when back in 2000 we were 3 times a week then, so we quickly progressed to 3 and think we're going to go 4, and then the year after full-time. So I think follow the journey on our website. Really, it's an exciting one.
Thanks. I really appreciate the time, Mike. I need to get up there and give you a bit of support. So give me a shout.
Yeah,
I'll pop in the car.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark.